Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're starting a new series on the wild days of the judges. This follows up on our series of after Joshua, and in particular, it's about the time from when the last generation of Joshua died until the days of King Saul. And it's called the wild days of the judges because, in many ways, it's similar to the Wild West period of American history, where the roughly western half of the country after the Civil War for 15, 25, to 25 years, depending on the area, had no, had little or no governance, real law enforcement in many areas. Wasn't even really settled. There were bands of Native Americans who didn't who fought each other as well as anyone else who happened to show up. And some were quite hostile. But there are also people that were quite hostile of European Americans. They were their brand. People came in from Mexico, etc. And they formed gangs, roving gangs that went on rampaged against anyone they could find. And it was pretty much up to people to protect themselves often and take the law into their own hand because there was no other law available. So and that so this, that's why we refer to this as the wild days of the judges. And we're going to begin a little recap to show how we got to this point. How Israel got to this point, and we'll expound upon the conditions a little bit more as we go along. We begin here in Judges 2, verse 3 through 7. We read the following: Wherefore also I said, I will not drive them out before you. They shall be thorns in your sides, and their God shall be a snare unto you. And it came to pass, the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the children of Israel. The people lifted up their voice and wept. And they called the name of that place Bochim. And they sacrificed there unto the Lord. And when Joshua had let the people go, the children of Israel went every man to his inheritance to possess the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders that lived Joshua, who had seen the great works of the Lord they did for Israel. Okay, so the first part up here, these first three verses, describes what happened, and the second part talks about when it happened. Okay, now, and what happened was, the Lord, to this, and he's doing this to the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord's actually doing the speaking here. Remember, this angel of the Lord had been with them since Egypt, since the Exodus. This pillar by night, cloud by day. The angel of the Lord was in that, and he would go, and he went before them, even with Moses alive on the eastern promised land. And the deal was he would take care of the things they could not take care of themselves because they were up against people they could not win against without his help. That each nation had more had more people than the nation of Israel. There were seven of those nations, and the people in them were bigger and stronger. So the deal was he would go before, and he would go before and do the heavy lifting, take care of the things they couldn't, and the things they could, it was their responsibility to come behind and take care of those. And then eventually the Lord said he wasn't going to give that all the land at one time, but rather it was going to be generation after generation. And basically the process is we push out enough for the amount of people we have right now to settle the land in kind of an even dense population density that's strong to keep anyone from coming back in. And we push out them, they go to the next area and they push out the wild animals and prepare the land for the next generation that's going to repeat that process. And to remind you, all this land that Israel had been promised. It's roughly about the size of the state of Kentucky. As you can see, in a way, you can kind of imagine flipping the state of Kentucky over. It's similar in size and shape in some regards as well. Not exactly, but gives you kind of the same ideal. But it's roughly the same size as the state of Kentucky. And they only took a small portion of this up to about here, and then across. Well, this is from Ezekiel's time, but then across along about where it says Jude, about that width, okay, and about that in a little area up along here along the Jordan River as well, and give you a little better idea. Right here, they went in here and took a part, this part, maybe 15 kilometers wide or so, about 10 miles, something like of that nature, going all the way up to all the way here, and then all the way across here, 10, 20 miles uh, width again across here. And what I did was it separated it separated the Canaanites and the southern Canaanites and the northern Canaanites that could not help each other because they were afraid to come into Israel if they fought, as long as Israel's following the plan. They were to build their population density. But inside this band, the children of Israel didn't go and settle it. As Joshua said, they were lazy. Why are you being slack? And what they did and said sometimes was like here, Manasseh. So like up here, Manasseh here, this land here where it says Megiddo. So this really, if you read it, this belongs to Issachar, all the way over the sea, and Asher comes down here to Dor. This belonged to Asher, that belonged to Issachar, and they couldn't drive people out of the cities, and they took the farmland around here because it was easier than settling the farmland they had, and also perhaps they thought the land was better for some regard or whatever, and they just wanted it. But there was these factors of greed, laziness, and perhaps not just not wanting to settle down. Because what the Lord was telling them to do was, after 7 years of fighting, was settle down, become farmers, take over those farms, keep running them, become farmers, settle down in the cities, rebuild whatever damage is done, and become craftsmen or whatever, and not to be soldiers no more. And some of them just want to keep being this soldier lifestyle they've been used to. So they didn't obey the Lord, and they didn't, and they left a lot of this unsettled. And Canaanites moved back in. The saying is, nature abhors a vacuum. Well, because of that, because they didn't drive them out the way he said, and worse yet, they made a covenant with one. They made a covenant with Rahab, but that was a covenant in the name of the Lord, not. And Rahab was a believer in God. She's spoken of by faith. They raided with the Gibeons, who also showed they had faith in God. And the Gibeonites, and they also were absorbed into Israel and worship. And it was a covenant with God ultimately. Well, this was just a covenant with a man who was an idol worshiper, and it was just laziness. The angel of the Lord was right there with them. There's to scout the city, find out where find out, look for a secret way to get in, besides maybe the obvious front gate. And instead, they just found this guy out there and said, "Hey, you tell us where that is, and we'll let you and your family live." And it set off a series of compromises. And ultimately, they ended up making a bunch of covenants of tribute because they thought, "Hey, they do the work, we get the money." That's that's better than us working the farms. Well, them work the farms and give us the money for it. But doing so left those idols in their land. So the angel of the Lord says, "That's it." Bochim means weepings. Okay, so now they're weeping. Now here's when this occurred. I want you to notice when the children of Israel went, every man to his inheritance to possess the land. But they served the Lord all the days of Joshua. The elders outlived Joshua, had seen the great works of the Lord they did for Israel. Remember that Joshua generation. The youngest one's 20 years old when Joshua comes in. Okay, he's 20 years he's 21 20 years old when Joshua comes in. So when the last of those is until the last of those died, they were serving the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders, because the elders were enforcing the laws of God. Okay. Now, these dates aren't given exactly. That's why I got little question marks here. But here's where they came in at 2553. And the youngest one been 20 years old and upward. The oldest one would have been 57, 38 years of wandering. Everyone was 20. They could have only been 19 at the most, because everyone was 20 years above, died in the wilderness. So 57. But let's say the youngest one's 20. If they lived to be 100, and that wasn't uncommon. In fact, we're going to see at the end of this series another guy who lives to be close to 100. Then that was 80 years after they came to the promised land, before they died off. Bring us to the year 2613, and we're counting from when Adam was formed out of the dust. Okay. So you can say that's 80 years afterwards. And Joshua died sometime before then. If he was born the same year as Caleb, we know he lived 110 years old. If he was born the same year as Caleb, he died in 2585. He was perhaps a little older than Caleb, though, perhaps born a few years earlier, maybe a couple years earlier. But so it gives you the idea. But the important one is this one right here, 2613. All that generation, everything was going well as long as they were in charge. When they all died off, then this younger generation was in charge. And again, I compared them to American generations, the boomers, the Xers being that Joshua generation, and the millennials, the generation after them, who seems quite senseless here in our study at times. And here's part of why they're, why. Here's part of why we read in Judges 2, verses 10 through 15. And also all that generation were gathered their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Baalim. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed their gods, of the gods of the people around about them, and bowed themselves to them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and delivered them in the hands of the spoilers that spoiled them, and they sold them into the hands of their enemies round about. Whithersoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, the Lord said, and the Lord had sworn to them, and they were greatly distressed. Okay, as the Lord had said, they left those Canaanites in the land, and remember, the Lord said he wouldn't drive them all out once, but he's seeing that they keep his commandments. The commandment was have nothing to do with the ones that are in the land until it's time for you to drive them out. You don't make deals with them. Keep yourself separate from them. Except, well, they made covenants with them, and started intermingling with them, and eventually, and one of the things that unless they call you to sacrifice, eat of their sacrifice they made to their idol, and you come. Well, that's one of the things that happened here. And this generation, they didn't know the Lord. They hadn't seen the things he had done. That generation I mentioned before, the ones that were 20 years old were born in the wilderness, and seen the fire by night and cloud by day, and watched it, and saw all these things happen. The ones that were 57 were born in Egypt. Okay, they came over when they were 57. They were born in Egypt. But these the these when they were young, the angel of the Lord, remember, was going with the army, not staying in the camp, staying in the camp anymore. Went with the army, and then would just hang out, go at Shiloh. perhaps over the tabernacle, as it had done before when it wasn't when they weren't out fighting. Well, they had, they perhaps they'd seen it, but that was it. They had not gone to war. They didn't know any of these things and had not seen, and they had only heard that they're not to do these things. Well, they didn't obey their parents. They thought they knew better, and they ended up worshiping these gods. So God was angry with Israel and sold them. Notice, sold them into the hands of their enemies, like they were slaves, and he sold them to somebody else. Okay. Well, they said they'd be his servants or slaves, because we're all slaves to somebody. Or you want to admit it or not, you are, or somebody or something. And as if so, he sold them to their enemies, so they could no longer stand against them. And notice the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, to bring them trouble, because he had said so. Our God is faithful; he keeps his word. And he said, if you do these things and provoke me with other gods, I'm going to be against you. If you're going to be against me, they did and he did. But the main thing is that generation after this did not start till that Joshua generation. The last of them died off, similar to how the slavery didn't start to the last of the children of the last of the brothers of Joseph died off, and the slavery began after that in Egypt, because their descendants were worshiping the idols of Egypt, as we saw before. So now in Judges 3, verse 5-3, by recap, we get what prompted them to do this stupid thing, how they get there, besides just generally, remember, it's about turn to the left or the right that caused all these problems to begin with. Besides, the spirit of compromise made a little compromise with the guy coming out, saved him some work, and find this thing. Well, it's just one guy. We'll let him go off, him and his family. And, he's not going to live with us. He's going to go off and live with the other Canaanites, the Hittites. But it's off a series of pattern of compromise after compromise that led to the Melech Adonai leaving, because they left these people in the areas they weren't supposed to have any of them left in. And they started having discourse with them, and they end up worshiping their gods. And here's what ultimately led to them worshiping the other gods. And the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, Hittites, the Amorites, and Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. They took their daughters to be wives and gave their sons to their daughters and served their gods. The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and forgot the Lord their God and served Baalim and the groves. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. And the children of Israel served Cushan Rishathaim 8 years. Okay. So the Lord did what he said he would do. But what got them in this? Because they made contact with them, made covenants with them, started having regular discourse with them, business, particularly like bringing them the tribute. Okay. They got familiar with them, and they ended up marrying, and they're marrying. And it's their wives who brought them, their wives and their sons who got their wives, for that matter. It was their in-laws that they married that brought them into this idolatry. And everything the Lord had warned them about happened. So he sold them into there, again, as if they were slaves. Okay. And notice the wording there. Now, and they served him for 8 years. So going back to our little timeline here, the suppression began right after that generation died. Just like when Egypt was, they were slaves in the house of Egypt. I mean, it happened right after. Levi was the last one to die that we know, as far as we know. And that's how you got this. He died 138. That's when Egypt was a slave. The same pattern happens here. And now that Mesopotamian oppression began, and it's going to last for 8 years to 2661 from when Adam was raised out of the dust. Now we're going to continue on here with Joshua 15, verses 15 and 20. And here's what we read. And he went up from there to the inhabitants of Debir. And the name of Debir before was Kirjath Sefer. And Caleb said, he that smites Kirjath Sefer and takes it, to him I'll give Achsah my wife, my daughter to my daughter to wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the son of Caleb, took it, and he gave him Achsah his wife, his daughter to wife. And it came to pass, she came to him, and she moved him to ask him of her fire of her field and light of her ass. And Caleb said, what would you? Who answered, said, give me a blessing, for you have given me a southland. Give me also springs of water. And he gave her the upper springs and the nether springs, or let's say lower springs. This inherits the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. Okay, remember, Caleb asked for the farmland and the villages in this area. These cities were actually for there's two of them. The other one was Kirjath Arba, where he drove the three sons of Anak out, but the people, the tribe of Judah, the army of Judah killed them. But that was for the priests and the Levites. This one here was another one for the priests or the Levites. Okay, remember they had no inheritance. Well, the priests, the Levites had no inheritance. They were scattered out. All they got was cities and a half mile green and a half mile or perhaps a kilometer if you're metric green zone around the city, about 5/8 of a mile actually. Green zone around the city for their livestock, their horses and whatever. That's all they got. And they were scattered throughout. Well, this is one of those cities. So he's cleaned the city up, needs it cleaned out for his, and also so they can't come out there and raid his farms and in the villages and stuff he's over. Okay. That's in his inheritance. So he needs to do this, and so he sets this up as a test to select someone to be his not his predecessor, his successor. And this guy Othniel, notice his nephew, is the one that does it. Now, notice this unusual thing here. She asked him of a field. She came into him. As she came into him, she moved him to ask of her father a field, moved by him, this was supposed to be her husband, to ask her father a field. Now, what's the whole deal? These women don't have an inheritance of land normally. Caleb had sons. I went and looked it up over in Chronicles. Very unusual to give part of that land inheritance to a daughter. I mean, she's supposed to go over with this guy and live on his inheritance. Well, this was all about keeping him near Caleb. Caleb is owed this is after Joshua died. Remember, Caleb's about his age. Perhaps he'll outlive Joshua by a few years. And Joshua, the aide of Moses, became judge. Caleb was always associated with Joshua. Caleb was his right-hand man and became judge. But he's owed, and that position of judge, as we showed, has to be fulfilled. And he's looking for a man of faith and action who will fulfill it faithfully. So he puts in this contest. Well, he wants that man near him so he can do this. So he gives his daughter the unusual step of giving his daughter some of the property, so the son-in-law will live near him so he can train him in being the next judge. Remember, the position of the judge is primarily not in session, not all seasons like the lower courts, but in session once a year or whatever, to settle the hard cases and inquire of God, so that God effectively is ruling through them, and also It was a promise God would bring him would bring him up, would raise him up as at times of distress as deliverers as well. But the position of the judge was always necessary. So he's preparing him to be judge after him. And indeed, he does become judge after him. In Judges not 3, 9 through 11, we read about this is the stuff. The wild days have already began with this invasion. Really, it began after the next generation died, and the children of Israel did all those things. I mean, the younger ones are the ones making all this compromise to start with. But here's what we read. And when the children of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, delivered them, even Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel and went out to war, and the Lord delivered Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, in his hand. His hand prevailed against Cushan Rishathaim. And the land had rest 40 years. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died. Okay, so Othniel's been judged for 48 years. 40 of those, the land has rest. When it says it has rest, it means there's no war going on. It doesn't mean necessarily that everything's internally peaceful, but there's no invaders taking occupied part of the country or something like that. And so he's going on this. Now, I want you to notice, Othniel, what did he have at his hand to deliver Israel with? When this against this larger king, obviously larger, more powerful, they'd put him under. He had all he had was the army of Israel. Okay, so what prompted him to go to war with a much bigger, more powerful, more technologically advanced army? And when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and there's a constant theme here during the wild days of the judges. These judges we read about, they do these amazing things sometimes. But they do it in their own strength. The Spirit of the Lord came upon them, and that's what gave them the ability to do it. So he took what it was in his hand, which was the army of Israel that looked insufficient for the job, but the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and that made him sufficient for the job. Now, in Judges 3, 12 and verses 12 to 14, read the following that occurred after him. Oh, so this rest last. It began here in 1621, 2621, and last on 2661. So, but that's not going to last forever, because the children of Israel, just let's be honest, just aren't that bright. I mean, in this thing, they just can't seem to catch on. And here's what they do after he died. As long as he's alive and judging them, forcing the law of God, okay, they're walking the straight and narrow whether they want to or not. But as soon as he's gone and no one's restraining them, no man that is to say on this earth, they just go back to the evil they would have done if he hadn't been there. So here's what we read. The children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they done evil in the sight of the Lord. They gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel and possessed the city of palm trees. And the children served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. Okay, well, we have a little reminder here. We have a little reminder here. Here's Moab. Jericho's a city of palm trees. He went and ran over Reuben here on the east side, in part of Gad too, and he put the entire nation scattered around over here and here, as well as up in here. He put them under tribute, just as they had made covenants before. So that means that they served him. I mean, they had to bring him tribute. If he asked, said, "I want a road built," you guys go build me a road. They had to go build him a road, and this went on for 18 years. Well, why? They did evil on the side of the Lord. And notice the Lord's the one that strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab. He's the one that gave him the ability to do it. And notice this guy gathered Ammon and Amalek. Well, back here, Ammon, remember this land here that Sihon had had this part here and this part here. It belonged to Ammon and Moab before the Amorite king had taken it from them, and Israel took it from the Amorite king. Well, they got a little bit of an axe, a little bit of a beat there. Remember, it said half the country of Ammon. Well, half the country's here, half Moab, half of it's up here. They would like their half back that was taken from this by this Amorite king. So he didn't have any problem really getting Ammon to join him. And Amalek down, notice Edom doesn't join him, even though that would have made geographical sense. Amalek's way down here. And remember, Amalek is the one that is that one that attacked Israel right after, not long after, crossed the Red Sea when it was weak, when it was in a weakened condition. And then they didn't even attack the army; they attacked the women, the children, and the old people in the rear of the camp. And that's when Joshua, Aaron, and Hur had to hold up Moses' hand. As long as his hand was up, that was his first fighting, it'd be winning against Amalek. And God said be against Amalek forever. And that spirit of Amalek is what drives the Muslim Brotherhood today. So it gives you an idea of what kind of, so these are, think of the day Jordanians, the northern Jordanians, and these guys who are behind terrorism, okay? The spirit of terrorism. Well, that's who they're up against. And now he's used them to get the upper hand on Israel. And so they're going to serve him for 18 years. All the way up here to 2679, they're going to serve this guy because they did this. Now, there's a turning point though, and here's what makes things change after 18 years. In Judges 3:9-11. When the children of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them even. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry, I went the wrong one here. Well, the children, again, we see them crying to the Lord, just like they cried to the Lord in Egypt, under the oppression of Egypt. When the children of Israel cried to the Lord raised them up to deliver Ehud, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a man left-handed, and by him the children of Israel sent a present to Eglon, the king of Moab. But Ehud made him a dagger which had two edges, of a cubit length, and he girded it under his raiment upon his right thigh. And he brought the present unto Eglon, the king of Moab, and Eglon was a very fat man. And he made it into the offering to offer the present. He sent away the people that bear the present. Okay, so he wants us to deliver. Now I want you to notice a few things about this deliverer. He's a Benjamite, and if you remember, Benjamin's one of the smallest tribes. Okay, back to our allotment. Benjamin's one of the smallest tribes. It's one of the smallest allotments. It's also the one that's protected by everyone else because so it's kind of perhaps the least likely to succeed tribe as far as this kind of thing goes. Well, a bit of a short man disease among them, as we used to call it in the U.S. because they're also known as a ravening wolf, okay? Well, the ravening wolf's here. Well, this man's left-handed. And everyone in the Bible is left-handed or ambidextrous is from the tribe of Benjamin, by the way, everyone from Israel. So, but is that a disadvantage? Or what would, it's normally? Because the world is mostly right-handed people, and they tend to make things geared towards right-handed people. So if you're left-handed, you're always going to find yourself doing things in an awkward way or whatever, which is why often people they believe it's people who study these things believe that often ambidextrous people were born left-handed, but had to learn how to adapt to use their right hand for certain things as well. They get where they can use either hand. So he's got a little bit of a social disadvantage there. Some things aren't really making him likely to be a deliverer. But nonetheless, he's who the Lord had spoken to the previous judge to be his judge. He's been the judge the whole time, by the way, but he's not been a deliverer yet. Well, notice what he does. He's made him a dagger which had two edges. Notice he didn't even have anything to fight with. He had to make something of a cubit length. The cubit's 22/3 inches, roughly 55 centimeters for your metric. Now, why is he girded on his right thigh? Now, why is that important? Well, because of the length here, people put on their opposite thigh. Well, generally, when they search people, because most people are right-handed, they would search their left thigh, maybe pat them down or maybe show their left thigh or whatever, show they weren't carrying a weapon. So, a little negligence on their behalf, a little favor in the Lord, he's going to be able to keep this weapon concealed. And what's he doing? He's bringing tribute. That's what it means by this present. It wasn't like, oh, gee, we all love you so much, King Eglon. Eglon, we thought we'd bring you something nice. They meant this. They meant this is tribute, or or often people would bring these things to try to get favor for something from a king. So now he's sent away. So it's just him and Eglon there. But again, what he had nothing in his hand. He did make a dagger. So this guy's a dagger in his hand to deliver Israel with. They had to make. Now in Judges 3, verse 19 to 20, read the following. But he himself turned again from the quarries that were by Gilgal and said, I have a secret errand unto you, O king, who said, keep silence. And all that stood by him went out from him. And Ehud came unto him, and he was sitting in a summer parlor, which he had for himself alone. And Ehud said, I have a message from God unto you. And he rose out of his seat. And Ehud put forth his left hand, took the dagger from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. The haft also went after the blade, and the fat closed upon the blade, so he could not draw the dagger out of his belly, and the dirt came out. That's to say, the poop, okay? Well, notice what Ehud did. He turned himself again from the quarries that were built Gilgal. So he had left, and he got down here, and now the Spirit of the Lord has come upon him. And he's coming back. He's already made the dagger, but now he's coming back, and he has a secret errand unto you. Well, yeah, he got this secret errand. The secret errand is to carry out this assassination of this king. And notice the king has everyone else leave. Now they're in there alone, and he says he has a message from God to you, and he does. That message from God is, your days of rule and oppressing my people are over. So this Ehud got out of the seat to hear this message. Now notice, he may have been watching Ehud's right hand, perhaps had his eye on his right hand, distracted by looking at his right hand. This is what magicians often do. They'll get you to look at one hand, do something with the other hand. And because he's used to people being right-handed, well, he doesn't see Ehud's left hand pull the dagger out and stab him. He's not looking to the left side, he's looking to the right side. And notice how hard he stabs him. The haft is the handle of the dagger. The fat closed upon the blade. I mean, this guy's quite large. I mean, think about it. This thing is 20 and 2/3 inches. That's a rural cubit of Egypt size, we know from archaeology, or about 55 meters. And it goes all the way in him, and then the skin and closes up and hides the blade completely. However, poop comes out. So he stabbed him in the gut, which is really a painful way to kill somebody. And judgment of God. And the guy couldn't get the dagger out because of that. Perhaps he tried. Now, we move along. We move along in Judges 3, verse 23 to 25, and we look at Ehud's next move. Then Ehud went forth through the porch and shut the doors of the parlor behind upon him and locked them. And when he's gone out, his servants came. They saw that, behold, the doors of the parlor were locked. They said, surely he covers his feet in the summer chamber. They tarried until they were ashamed, and behold, he opened not the door of the parlor. Therefore they took a key and opened them. And behold, their Lord was fallen dead down on the earth. Okay, so he locks this door behind him. He shuts it, and now no one can see it. And because it's locked, people are afraid to disturb the king. And notice what their conclusion now. And here's what I think is going on. They think he's using the restroom. Men will often when they wear sandals, often if they had to urinate, we just see take a leak. It could splatter and get on their feet. So they cover their feet with a piece of cloth or something. Okay, that's what this refers to. They think he's in there using the restroom in a chamber pot or something. They're in a summer chamber, and they just waited until they just thought something's got to be wrong. And sure enough, something was wrong. Well, that gave Ehud plenty of time to escape. So Ehud has now escaped. Ehud has now escaped, and they may remember he did it. He might be able to get off scot-free, but he's not done yet because he hadn't really delivered Israel yet. He's now did something to embolden Israel so he can complete the deliverance. And here's what we read in Judges 3, verse 26 through 30. And Ehud escaped while they tarried and passed beyond the quarries and escaped to Seirath. All right, Seirath. And it came to pass when he was gone out that he blew a trumpet in Mount Ephraim, and the children of Israel went down to him from the mount, and he before them. He said, follow after me, for the Lord has delivered your enemy, the Moabites, into your hands. They went down after him, and they took the fords of Jordan towards Moab, and suffered not a man to pass over. And they slew of Moab at that time about 10,000 men, all lusty and all men of valor. And there escaped not a man. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had at rest fourscore years. Okay, we're going to talk about those fourscore years here in a minute, but there's a couple of things worth noting here. Again, let's bring our little map up. The Jordan River, like a ford's just a low place. Perhaps there's rocks or whatever, and it's easy to cross. Okay, well, they're trying to get back to Moab, and it's probably right down this area down here. Benjamin has a little strip, remember, or Reuben does, that went to the Jordan River. Right down here, perhaps near the Dead Sea, easy to pass in to get across here. Well, they're blocking that exit route, and down all the way down here. Here's where Caleb's at down here. Israelite armies up here. Israelite over here in various places. They're trapped now because those are done, because that's exited. And they kill 10,000 of them. And when it says they were lusty, it means they were in good shape. Okay. They weren't just men of war, men of valor in the army, but they were strong and and well able to fight. But it didn't matter. Moab, the deliverer was Ehud, and the Spirit of God was upon him. Because that's how it works, as we showed with the first judge. And they now notice Moab was the dude that day under the hand of Israel. Now the situation's been flipped. Moab is the dude under them. Okay. Any more trouble for Moab for a while. And this lasted for 40 this lasted for 40 years, for 80 years. Well, this 80 years is really 18. That was 18 years when Ehud rose up and made something to put in his hand, didn't even have anything, and then took what he had in his hand and rallied Israel and got them to do it. It was 2679 afterwards. And for 80 more years, it goes on to 2759. It continued on. Notice I got Ehud and Shamgar both, because it really is about both of them, their reign. There's no separate time given for these two men. It's about them combined, okay? And this brings us to our next judge here. Because what we see again is sort of this is after he dies, then what? Okay, who's the judge? Next judge. In Judges 3:31 through 4, sorry, Judges 31, 3, Judges 3, verse 31 through 4, verse 1, we read the following. After him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, which slew of the Philistines 600 men of ox goad. He also delivered Israel. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. Okay, Ehud's dead. Here's the next judge, and perhaps he started this before Ehud died. Perhaps Ehud just couldn't fulfill the duties of the office, got old or whatever. And this guy, notice, he took what was in his hand, an ox goad. And here's a picture of an ox goad from a museum. And you can see this one's about 200 years old, if I'm right, 150 years old, an American one. It's just a long, pointy stick. And you put and notice it's not that pointy. And they would use it to prod the ox to get them to start moving forward when the ox didn't want to. But it wasn't sharp enough to really cause any serious damage to the ox, just discomfort. But these 600, notice there's 600 men. He slew of the Philistines 600 men. These are not an army. These are not an army in a sense at all. Like the other, there's no sign. There's nothing about someone took over the land. Land's having rest from war, but internally it has these problems with these Philistine raiders. And again, there's no mention of an army or king or anything. These are roving bands of Philistines. And he killed all of them. And he also delivered Israel. Okay. But so like Ehud took what was in his hand, but Ehud got Israel to follow him, was able to rally the troops and get rid of them, get rid of this oppression of this king. This is quite different. These guys are operating kind of like terrorists or roving gangs of the Wild West, like I mentioned. And that's brought out here in Judges 5, verse 6 through 8. And here's where we read the situation was in the days of Shamgar. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath, and the days of Jael, the highways were unoccupied. The travelers walked through byways. The inhabitants of the village ceased, and they ceased in Israel, till I arose, a mother in Israel. They chose new gods. There was war in the gates. Was there a shield or spear seen among 40,000 in Israel? Okay, remember we saw that pattern before twice. They cried unto the Lord, and the Lord delivered them. Well, they didn't cry unto the Lord. Shamgar delivered them to some degree. He killed 600 of them. And, they were afraid to go where Shamgar was. But notice the situation. The situation arose, and we'll look at that in our next lesson, till after the days of Shamgar. Okay? The highways were unoccupied. Well, why? Well, we got this thing from England. They call them highwaymen. We use that expression sometimes in the U.S., but all they were gangs that would hang out, that would hide along near highways. There was a lot of traffic, and try to rob people of their, like stagecoach robberies or train robberies back in the Old West, even sort of ideal. So people, and it was so bad in Israel because of those roving bands of Philistines and perhaps other groups as well, that people wanted to get from one place to another. They walked to the byways. They went the back roads. They went those routes that weren't used very, here in America, where I grew up, we'd call them goat trails. A goat trail, when it's talking about in terms of vehicle, was often something barely wide enough to get a car, a small car through. But you had to be pretty high off the ground because the ground was really uneven. But anyway, so they're having to come on all these back roads to go from one place to another. And notice they're not even living in the cities, the villages, because they have no security in those villages. And it's like this part of Oklahoma where I live in. It was called Indian Territory before it became a state. And in Indian Territory, the federal government, did a really stupid thing. They gave these tribes territories inside of Indian Territory. And here was the rule. A Native American tribe is law enforcement can only arrest members of its own tribe inside their own land, inside their own tribal boundaries. Someone came to their tribe, went over, committed a crime, they couldn't arrest them. Someone that was Native American came in, committed a crime, they couldn't arrest them. Someone in their tribe committed a crime and ran off and ran outside got outside their jurisdiction. They couldn't arrest them, and the people on the other side couldn't arrest them either. The only one who could arrest anyone was a federal marshal. And like in the John Wayne movie, True Grit, it was set in Indian Territory, and he's trying to capture these criminals and take them to McAllister, so they can be taken back to Fort Smith to face the judge. Only the U.S. Marshal had authority to arrest anyone anywhere inside Indian Territory. And it wasn't untypical to have one U.S. Marshal assigned to an area, say, a couple thousand square miles, 50 by 40 square miles or something like that. Given, with one guy with a mule typically. Well, needless to say, there was a lot of crime in Indian Territory. In fact, you get one of those books, if you look at a book or something about famous outlaws of the Old West, more than half of them were in Indian Territory. It was the wild days, and those wild days continued, settled down some as a little bit better laws were given, a little more authority to some of the tribes, but it didn't really come to an end till statehood in 1907, and even after that, people like Pretty Boy Floyd and stuff came out of Oklahoma until the 1930s because of this, because that Wild West mentality was still in many places there, that sense of lawlessness. In some parts, even when I moved out here in the 90s, there were some areas that was, some FBI guys went down to this one area to deal with some drug dealing criminals, and they never came out. So this is kind of what's going on. This kind of the situation. And why is all this lawlessness? Because it can't rally the people to take action. Why? Because they're afraid. Why are they afraid? Because they chose new gods. Their faith, they have no, they have these gods cannot help them. And that's actually and that's why God allowed the war to come in. So he can't rally them. He can't get the army behind him like, like Ehud had done. All he can do is go around like one federal marshal in a huge territory and deal with whoever he can on a one by one basis. Sort of a protector like the Lone Ranger. If you ever watched or read those stories when you're in the West where this ranger's the only one out there to protect people. They can only be in one place at one time. And that's what this Shamgar of Anath is. He's like the Lone Ranger. But there's an important lesson in these things for us, an important life application for us, and we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about that. And that was all these men had this same thing in common that we see with Moses here in Exodus 4, verses 2 through 5. And the Lord said unto him, what is in your hand? And he said, a rod. And he said to him, he said, cast it to the ground. And he cast it to the ground, became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. And the Lord said to Moses, put forth your hand and take it by the tail. He put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. That they may believe the Lord their God, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared unto you. Okay. They've cried out to the Lord for deliverance, to the bondage of Egypt. Here's the man God's chosen to be their deliverer. And the only thing Moses has in his hand is a rod. I mean, that's an ox goad's longer than a rod. Maybe about the same size of a dagger, but it's wood, not metal, not sharp. But all the Lord needed was what was in Moses' hand, because God's going to did all the heavy lifting. It says when Moses parted the Red Sea, Moses held the rod up, but it says God caused the wind to blow all night and separate the sea. The Spirit of God is, when God's on your side, what you have right now, today, is enough. All you need is what's in your hand today. Othniel had a obviously inferior army in terms of numbers and strength and technology. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been ran over in the first place. But that's what was in his hand. But the Spirit of God came upon him, and he won. He delivered them. Ehud had to make something to put in his hand, a dagger, but he had to kill the king. He couldn't have killed. He couldn't have got the army and shut the fords by himself and drove them out there. He needed the army of Israel, who was outnumbered, or who had been. These other men had been bigger and stronger, and whatever's indicated. But there was in his hand, and he delivered Israel. He started out with nothing. He had to make something even. Othniel had a sharp, pointy stick, a long, sharp, pointy stick in his hand. But he did what he could to deliver Israel, even though he could not get them to rally behind him. In Moses, all he had was a rod, a short piece of wood about the same size as that dagger. But it was enough because God's going to do all the heavy lifting. And the Spirit of God is what made it possible for the other men. Now, in Ecclesiastes 11:6, we read the following. In the morning, sow your seed. In the evening, withhold not your hand. For you know not whether shall prosper, either this or that, or really both alike shall be good. Okay, so it's talking about using what's in your hand, your seed. Go sow it. In the evening, with not hold your hand. Do something in the evening time you can't do during the day. Something different. Okay, maybe some sort of craft, or something. Spin wool, whatever the case may be. Make shoes, whatever the case may be. And you don't know if one of them will prosper. Maybe they both will. But the point is, do something with what you already have. Don't be lazy and don't be saying it's not enough. This is never going to work out. You just don't know. And they may both work out great. They may both work out great for you. But it's guaranteed if you do nothing, you're not going to get anywhere. Use what's in your hand. In Zechariah 10, Zechariah 4, verse 10, we read the following. Who has despised the day of the small things? For they shall rejoice at the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those seven. They are the eyes of the Lord which run to and fro throughout the earth. Okay. Well, remember, Ehud is obviously the judge. Also, he's the one charged of bringing the present. He's recognized as the ruler over Israel, responsible for that. It's worth mentioning as well. But remember, when he started, he had nothing. Literally had nothing, had to make a dagger. The day of small things. Othniel, and the way from the call to the Lord for 8 years. And we did, you know, he had an army that wasn't as big and whatever, small things. We didn't despise it. Don't despise the day of small beginnings. Why? The eyes of the Lord. It doesn't mean he's got eyes and they got little feet and they're running around. It means he's looking back and forth throughout the whole earth. What? Why? For ways to bring success to the people of God. Zerubbabel has been given a task by God in this context here to rebuild the temple, make some repairs, etc. And the job looks impossible to him. Looks impossible to him. But the eyes of the Lord are looking throughout the earth, finding opportunities to bring this to pass. But he has to begin with what he has, and he doesn't have anything hardly at all. If you read the whole thing, but don't despise the day. Don't wait for a better day. Today's the day to start doing things. Use what's in your hand, and hear from God His plan, and it'll prosper. Just like our judges we looked at earlier. Now, in Ecclesiastes 9, 10 through 11, read the following. Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. There is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, or wisdom in the grave where you go. I returned and saw under the sun, and the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill. But time and chance happens to all of them. Okay, in a race, you expect the fastest man, fastest runner to win. In a battle, the strongest man to win. You expect if only one person's going to eat, it's going to be the wisest one. He's going to make sure he gets fed. You think the men of understanding would be the ones who would get all the wealth. And, people are always telling you that, get an education. You got to have an education to get wealth, blah, blah, blah. But notice it's not always so. And favor, men of skill will often get favor from kings and whatever. They show they have skills and the king wants something done. And they'd find favor with them, But there's another factor involved. Time and chance. Now, chance, people might think of luck. People say someone got lucky. Solomon's saying that to some degree. But remember, he also said the lot's cast in the lap. The lot's cast in the lap, but the Lord decides the outcome. So this instead of chance, perhaps we could say circumstances. The swiftest guy doesn't win the race because he tripped. The strongest guy didn't win the battle because of something unforeseen. There's many case of this in history. There's enough bread to go around. The wise man is not the one that gets it, because through perhaps some unforeseeable event, something he couldn't control, ends up in the hands of somebody else. Men of understanding are the ones that should get the riches, but they don't always go to them. It could be a number of reasons. Someone just likes someone else better and gives it to them, even though they're giving it to like in the case of the prodigal son. A fool is just going to spend it all and waste it. But nonetheless, and men of favor to men of skill. They're the ones people should favor if they have any sense, because they're the ones that can give them a good return on their investment. But sometimes they favor somebody else for whatever reason. They may be totally no skill, but they just like the way they look or whatever the case is. But the main thing is it's time and circumstance happens to all of them. Something happens unexpected that turns the tables. That's what Solomon says. And you don't know, and you don't know it's either, because God's the one's going to make it happen often. So what you're part to do is whatever you do it with your might, do it with all your might. Whatever you find to do, work as hard as you can, because when you die, this life is a test, and the test is over when you die. And they'll do more work on this earth. There's not going to be more device that's like plans on this earth for you when you're dead. They have more knowledge of what's going on this earth when you're dead. Obviously, you have knowledge of your surroundings, like Lazarus and the rich man, like Lazarus and the rich man. But you don't know what's going on the earth. The rich man didn't know. It's one that sent him to his brothers. Remember, no wisdom in this earth. No wisdom to make a change that's meaningful on the earth when you're dead. So don't look at other people and say, wow, they're faster, they're stronger, they're wiser, they got more understanding, they're more skillful, and I cannot win, so I'm not even going to try. No, your part is to do whatever your hand finds to do, whatever it is you are supposed to be doing, or can do, or have the opportunity to do. Do it with all your might. Whatever your job is, work at it as hard as you can. Because time and circumstance, God controls those. And he can promote you if he wants to, and nobody can stop it. And also, if he's against you, you're not going to get promoted. And no one can promote you if he decides you're not going to be. People just don't have as much control as they like to think often. Although they do have some, obviously, because you can ignore Solomon's advice, and then you're certainly not going to win the race except. So you have some say in the matter, but not the final say in the matter. Now, let's go to Zechariah 4, verse 6 through 7. And back to Zerubbabel. And remember, and this way, and this is what Zerubbabel is telling. This is the word for, I'm sorry, Zechariah tells Zerubbabel concerning the task at hand. And he answered and spake to me, saying, the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Who art thou, great mountain? Before Zerubbabel you shall become a plain. And he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, grace, grace unto it. Okay, now, this mountain he's referring to in this context is figurative. If you look at the context, it's up. And the mountain is insurmountable circumstances that Zerubbabel cannot overcome on his own. It is just too hard. There's no way he can accomplish what God called him to do. But Zerubbabel's not called to do it on his own strength. It's not by Zerubbabel's might, nor by his power, but by my spirit. The Spirit of God is in play here. And the Spirit of God is going to make that mountain into a plain. If you think about walking, if you got a plain, it's pretty easy to walk across it. You got a mountain, you may have to climb it, you may not even be able to climb it, depending on the situation. Now, the headstone there is talking about is literally the headstone for the temple, the cornerstone, Figuratively, it's the headstone, like the headstone of the grave for this mountain. This mountain, this insurmountable, these insurmountable obstacles, circumstances that Zerubbabel cannot overcome, are as good as dead before the Spirit of the Lord. So, in Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus, Yeshua, if you want to go with Aramaic, expounds upon this and tells us this principles for us today as well. Here's what he says in Mark 11, verse 22 through 24. And Jesus answering says unto them, have faith in God. Verily I say unto you, whosoever shall say to this mountain, be ye removed and be it cast in the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe those things which he says shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he says. Therefore I say to you, whatsoever you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. Okay. This last verse right here is often taken out of context and twisted. We're going to look at it in context and untwisted, as it were. Well, whatsoever you desire when you pray, when you ask God, believe you receive them, you shall have them. Okay, so if I decide I desire my neighbor's wife, I can pray for that and believe God's going to give it to me, and I'm going to have her. No, no, I don't like my neighbor. I believe I pray and ask God, help me to kill this guy and not get caught. And I convince myself God's going to do it. Is God going to really answer that prayer? Am I really going to receive him and have him? No. Because the whatsoever things you desire is conditional upon having faith in God. Faith in God is confidence in what God said that leads to action. Your desires have to be in line with that. Now, what's this mountain? Like we just saw in Zechariah. Now, there will be literal mountains when Jesus comes to the earth, particularly during the tribulation. They're literally cast into the sea. But that mountain he's talking about there, just like when he said, eat my flesh, he's talking figuratively. He's talking, just as we saw with Zerubbabel, figuratively about circumstances that they cannot overcome themselves. But if you will ask and pray and believe that you receive them, you're going to have them. Those shall have them. You believe here, some amount of time passes, then you have them. And that amount of time may be a few minutes or a few decades, okay? There's no guarantee, there's no specification here of how long it is between when you pray and believe and when you receive. Okay? But when you're out carrying out the will of God in that circumstance that's too large for you, it's going to be cast in the sea, it's going to be removed, it's not going to be a problem anymore at some point. And you don't get to pick the time. Time and circumstance happen at the discretion of God. He's going to do it. Your part is to never give up, to never quit. You're not doubting in your heart. Now, how are you not going to doubt? Well, you're not doubting. Faith in God. Faith is confidence that leads to action. Faith in God is confidence in what God said that leads to action. You're not doubting that God's going to keep his word. Now, if he didn't give you his word on it, then it's not really faith. It's wishful thinking. It's you wanting God basically to be your servant, to give you what you want to consume on your own lust. James says you have not because you ask not, or you ask amiss to consume it on your own lust. You're just asking for something you want, as opposed to something like Zerubbabel was asking to help build up the kingdom of God. Shaul, the apostle Paul says a son is no different than a servant until he receives the inheritance. And he goes on to say, we haven't received the inheritance. We won't receive the inheritance after we die. We are God's servants. We are his servants for him to use for his purposes to build up his kingdom. This is not about him becoming our servant for us to use for our purposes to build up our kingdom. As this verse has been ripped out of context many times and twisted to mean. Now, we're going to continue on in Matthew 14, verse 15 through 21. When it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, "This is a desert place, and now the time has passed. Send the multitude away that may go into villages and buy themselves victuals." And Jesus said to them, "They need not depart. Give you them to eat." And they said to him, "We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes." He said, bring them here to me." He commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. They didn't eat, were all filled. And they took up the fragments that remained, 12 basketfuls. And then they had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Okay. Now the Bible says a wise man sees ahead and prepares. So the disciples were using all the wisdom here. They said, we got to send them away so they can go buy victuals, means something to eat, okay? Buy themselves something to eat because it's just getting late. But Jesus said to him, that you don't have to. You give them. And what happened here? What was in their hand? 5 loaves and 2 fishes. How many did they need to eat? 5,000, about 5,000 men, plus their women, the women and children. So, easily 25,000 people, perhaps more. This is not adequate for the job. And there's a whole lot in here I could go into in this little story, in this little episode in the life of Messiah, but I'm not going to go into all of it today. But I want you to draw this. Bring them here to me. What's in your hand? Give it to the Lord. And the Lord will do with it what you cannot do for yourself. What in your hand is sufficient when you give it to the Lord and let the Lord handle it. You have a part. Notice he gave the loaves to the disciples and the disciples to the multitude. They had to put it in the Lord's hand. That they had to do with it what he told them to do with it. Okay. But the same is true with you. Give whatever you have to the Lord in your hand and do with it what he tells you to do with it. And it will be sufficient for him to do his purposes because he will make it so. Now in Luke 22:35, we see another case of this. And he said to them, "When I sent you without purse or script or shoes, lacked you anything?" And they said, "Nothing." Okay. Purse, carrying money, script. Well, don't think of script like scripture, like writing. He doesn't mean a writing pad. He's talking about like a backpack to carry extra shoes and extra clothing in. No, well, nothing but a staff. The clothes on their back, the shoes on their feet, and a staff. And they were out for quite a while, going from place to place. And did they lack anything? Nothing. The Lord supplied them everything they needed as they were carrying out his will. And so he will do with you. If God is in it, it will work out. He didn't tell them. Now, sit there and figure out how much money you're going to need for this mission, and gather a bunch, and get how much stuff you're going to need, and how you're going to be able to carry it around, and so on and so forth. No, take what you got. In fact, tell him not to even take it. He said, just take the bare minimum, and trust me to take care of things. And they did, and he did. It's the same with you. You don't need to wait till you get enough stuff, till you get enough education, enough whatever to do the will of God. He has something for you to do today. And if he's in it, it'll work out. And he may be calling you to get more education, for example. And it may look insurmountable, but if he's called you to do it, start doing what you can. What he'll give you one step at a time. Do that. It will work out in the end if it's there. They lacked nothing, and neither will you. And here's what we see in Philippians 4. This brought here in Philippians 4, verse 16 through 19. Even in Thessalonica, you sent to me once and again to my necessity, not because I desire to give, but that I desire fruit that may abound to your account. But I have all and am bound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus things which were sent from you, an odor of sweet smell, an acceptable a sacrifice acceptable, well pleasing to God. But my God shall supply your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. Okay. Now, Bill, again, take this out of context and even look at the rest of it. Why will God supply their needs? Because they were about God's business. Paul was the apostle of God, the apostle of Christ, Messiah, the Shiliach of Mashiach, okay? Now, his necessity, he wasn't being lazy, but now, not because he desired a gift, but the fruit with a bound account. They're gonna get credit for this. They're gonna get credit for this when life is over. Paul says, according to his gospel, every man's going to receive from God, good and bad, according to their works. They're going to get good. This is going to come back to them uncountable times throughout eternity in a good way. But it's also going to come back to them in this life. Notice when you give, Paul's a missionary to missionaries who are out preaching the gospel. You are giving an odor, a acceptable sacrifice that's pleasing to God. Epaphroditus was the middleman. He was the carrier between Paul, him and them, okay? So when you're in God's business, when you're taking care of God's business, God will take care of your business. He will take care of your need according to his riches in Christ's glory, Christ Jesus, if you are taking care of the needs of others in the body, particularly missionaries in this context here. So don't be afraid to give, and don't think what you have is too little. God doesn't measure you. Remember this, the widow's mite. He doesn't measure by how much you give. He measures you by how little you keep or how much you keep. Okay? How much you keep back. The woman put everything she had in. She trusted God to take care of him, and he did. Take care of her, I should say. So, he will take care of you if you will do this. You'll take what's in your hand and use it for his purposes. He will work it all out for you. You will never lack a thing you need. And, I've been doing this for over 40 years, and I can tell you, I've never lacked anything I've needed. Never. Through 2 years, twice of unemployment because I refused to work on the Sabbath. One of them was because I refused to work on the Sabbath. Never lacked anything I needed. Not because I was being lazy. I was willing to work and work hard, but I wasn't willing to desecrate God's holy day that I agreed to keep. Because that's all it was for. Lesser commandment, but I agreed to keep them. So, and so it wasn't a matter of laziness at all. It was a matter of refusing refusing to let the world squeeze me into its mode and force me to work when God said, "You will not work on I don't want you to work on this day." And God took care of me. And that's just one example I give you out of many in over 40 years' time. He will take care of you. You go about his business, he'll take care of your business, and you don't have a darn thing to worry about. Okay, let's continue on with Acts 5, verse 38 through 39. Now I say to you, refrain from these men and let them alone. For if this counsel, this work be of men, it will come to naught. But be of God, you can overthrow it, lest happily be found to fight, even to fight against God. Okay, context here's the 12 apostles. Gamaliel is advising the enemies of Messiah, the same ones that him crucified, concerning these men. If this preaching of Messiah is of men, it's going to come to nothing. If what you're doing, if you're what you're doing is just your ideal, it's not going to come to nothing. It's going to come to nothing. Even if you think you have success in this life by it appears that you're going to die and leave it all behind. And in the end, it's going to be of no value to you. It will not help you at all, one way or the other. But if God's in it, no one can overthrow it. And if they try, if they resist you in carrying out the will of God, they are fighting against God. Now, in Romans 8, 31, 32, we read the following. What then shall we say? If God be for us, who can be against us? He has spared not his own son, but delivered him for us all. How shall he not with him freely give us all things? Okay. These things, these circumstances, we'll look at them here in a moment. These circumstances that are against us, this opposition to carrying out the will of God. Who can be against us? What is God not going to give us that we need to carry out his will when he gave his own son for us? He didn't spare his son, but delivered him for us. We talked about the Lamb of God in our Lamb of God series. How that punishment was for our sake. He did nothing wrong. God loved us while we were yet sinners, and he sent his son to die for us while we were yet his enemies, so we could be reconciled to him. If he gave his unspeakable gift of his son, why would he hold back something like money from us if we need it for his will? Why would he hold back anything we need to carry out his will if he didn't hold back his own son? God's on our side. We cannot lose. All we can lose is to quit fighting. No one can be against us. No one is going to win. That doesn't mean it won't be a fight or a struggle and troubles we have to overcome. That's what we're called, overcomers. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. It means we have something we're opposed to, but we will win. Never promised that it'd be easy, but only that'd be worth it. And it never promised, he never promised we'd have to fight, only that we'd have the victory. Now, I wrap up here with these circumstances that Paul was referring to, Shaul, the Apostle Paul, in Romans 8, 35 through 39. Who shall separate us from the love of God? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Look, He doesn't promise these things won't come. All these things came to the Apostle Paul. I mean, the sword, he was, literally beheaded died by beheading. Tribulation, trouble, all kinds of trouble, distress, and all those things came upon him. Did that mean that God had abandoned him somehow? That he was somehow Christ no longer loved him? No, no, no. For his sake, we are killed all the day long. Martyr means witness. For the sake of Messiah, we're killed. We're counted as sheep for the slaughter, just as he was counted as sheep for the slaughter. If we are killed as a witness for him, it is a witness, a testimony against those who rejected him. It does not separate us from his love at all. It doesn't mean he doesn't love us because problems come to us. Problems come to us only means we have that his enemy is our enemy. And we're doing the will of God, the will of Messiah. In the same way that persecuted Messiah is going to persecute us. As he said, if they hated me, they're going to hate you too. But we are more than conquerors through him that loved us in all these things. We persevere. We still turn out the winners. Why are we more than conquerors? Because he's done the heavy lifting. He's conquered death, hell, and the grave. He done the things we cannot do and left for us to do the things that we can do. We are more than conquerors. We're riding on the conqueror's coattail, the conqueror being Messiah. And notice what Paul is persuaded that none of these things, there's not death. No, God's love still loves us when we die. In fact, precious of the death of the righteous in the eyes of God. Doesn't sever us from the love of God. We die when we die for doing his will. It causes him to look upon us even more favorably. Life happens, things happen. But when you live a life for God, it's not going to separate you from him. Life is not meant to separate you from God. It's meant for you to demonstrate the love of God to the rest of the world. Angels, particularly fallen angels, principalities, powers, angel philosophy, perhaps political powers, except on this earth. They may cause you trouble, but they cannot separate you from God's love. Just because you're going through trouble doesn't mean God quit loving you. And things present or things to come. You may be going through something bad now, or you see something bad coming down the road. God didn't stop loving you because of that. He's already given his son for you. In fact, nothing, no circumstances, any other creature, any other thing that's made on this earth, thing you can imagine, can separate us from the love of God. Again, he doesn't promise us not to have a fight. All three of our judges had fights. All three of them took what was in their hand or made something even when they didn't have anything in their hand, made something to put in their hand. All three of them had a fight. All three of them had trouble they had to overcome. All three of them got victory because God did the heavy lifting through the Spirit of God. And because they loved God, he loved them. And he loves us as much as them. So take what's in your hand today, no matter how small it is. Find out what God wants you to do and get to work doing it. It is enough. Because if God's in it, it will work out. And nobody will be able to stop you from fulfilling what he gave you to do. It will happen in God's timing. Even if it doesn't come as quick as you'd like. God, it isn't been time for God yet. He let these people wait sometimes 8 years, 10 years, whatever. In some circumstances, he let people wait until they were. He let people wait till they were way past. Sarah waited was way past the age of giving women. I mean, of having children. Sarah knew that he did it. He may wait till the circumstances leave no doubt it's him, or if there's a change, it had to be him. But he will do it. He will not let you down. He will keep every promise he's ever made. If you do what's right, he's going to do what's right by you. If you do what's wrong, you're going to suffer the consequences, like we saw with them when they turned to other idols. So stay the path, fight the good fight, and you will win. The only way you can lose is to quit or not start. Take what's in your hand and and get in the fight. God is with you if you're with him. That's all I have to list for this week. Until next week, shalom.